Welcome to the Shared Practices podcast. We are in season 6 on growth, which includes marketing. And we've had some amazing discussions here with Michael Anderson from the Wonderist Agency. And I'm excited to have him back. Every time we talk, we have to end the conversation with like 5 more topics for the next time. There's a slight chance that we might get through a decent amount of what we've committed to today. So I'm excited for that. So Michael, welcome back to the show.
Hey, it's good to be back.
Cool. Well, let's do this. Let's if anyone hasn't listened to those previous episodes, I highly recommend go back in this season, find those episodes. We've laid the groundwork and the foundation for this overall discussion before getting to like some specific channels and lanes and tactics. Because people just want the tactics. They just want like, hey, tell me what to do. I'll go do that, and they don't want to have to like think about it. But you need to think before you start pumping money into random things. So, but let's get to some more specifics. We talked about Google. We're going to talk about paid advertising as a whole, and then within that, there's a lot of different categories. So, where would you start with paid advertising?
Yeah, I think probably just on the heels of our last conversation about Google organic, I find a lot of people get this confused because the minute they hear keywords, they think paid. And so, just to kind of set the stage again, there's two different ways that we can look at Google paid versus organic specifically. One is that you are, making changes to your website, your content, your listings, all of those things so that Google by itself, without you paying any money to that at all, it decides that you're one of the best results, one of the best resources when people search for a keyword. Sometimes people say, well, it's like free advertising, right? And if you're not paying a company to do your SEO, it is. It's literally a free way to get attention. The other way to do this is to pay. I like to say pay to play, right? And if we're specifically talking about Google, what that means is that you pick specific keywords that you think are valuable to you. And I think there's ones we can reasonably agree. Dentist near me. If you're doing specialty services, Invisalign, dental implants, same day crowns. These are things, dental emergency, right? If someone searches for those keywords, we want to show up. If you pay Google and you say, listen, I want to show up when someone searches for that, it's considered pay-per-click advertising. Now, one other really important thing to know, specifically for Google, is that you don't pay just to show up, at least for kind of the main paid advertising we're talking about today. You pay when someone clicks on the ad. So that's pay-per-click advertising. There's another form of this that's more visual. It's pay per impression, right? Every time someone sees like a display ad. But for right now, we should really focus on pay per click. So
and for example, like if I search for someone, and I know that their company, like it's a friend of mine, and I've Googled their business, and their paid ad comes up, and their normal URL comes up. I skip the paid ad and I click on their normal URL because I don't want to get them dinged a pay-per-click by clicking on their ad when I could have just clicked on their normal website.
Yeah, 100%. And so, that is not uncommon where you'll see someone that has an ad up in that. There's really kind of like usually 3 or 4 spots that you can see ads at right at the top of Google. And we know from a lot of data that I think it's like 75% of people that are doing a search will click on, one of those first 3 or 4 listings that they see. I know a lot of people I never click on ads, right? Nobody right. else clicks on ads. Data does not support that. People are clicking on the first couple things that they see. And then you might see the same listing below organically, like you said. And so, if you don't want to charge your friends, then make sure you're not clicking on the paid ad there. So good on you for saving them money.
Well, and I wanted to see, do people ever confuse these and think that if my SEO is really good, it is less expensive per click for certain keywords? They're separate, right? Like, it doesn't matter how good your SEO is, your keyword game and the competition for the keywords is sheerly a money thing.
Yeah, 100%. They are totally separate. One other thing that I think can come up is the, this idea of like, what if my SEO is really good? Maybe I don't need to spend on pay-per-click. And I want to be clear, pay-per-click advertising is not for everybody or every market, right? If you're in a more rural market, There's, not a lot of households around you. It's an older skewing demographic. Pay-per-click may not be good for you. And if you are performing really well in SEO and there's not a very competitive pay-per-click competition in your area, may not be something you need to do. But just because you rank well for SEO does not mean that you shouldn't think about doing Google Ads. Again, for that reason of, and just go on Google right now and search for something, search for dental implants, and you'll see you might be number one organically. But you say, well, where the heck am I? There's 4 ads at the top, then there's the map section, and then there you are. You've got to scroll halfway down the page before you get to that first listing. That may be a good reason for you to actually pay to have those ads right at the top of Google.
I also think there's a human decision making. Like in my mind, there's the holy trifecta of if someone shows up for paid and they show up organically and their listing shows up with good reviews, then like there's something in our human brain that just says, oh, they must be the guy. This must be the dentist. She shows up here, here, and here. She must be the one that like everyone clicks on. And so there is also that kind of like repeat exposure of being paid, organic, reviews and a listing and all of the above just lining up, and people are like, okay, let's go here.
Frequency is a big determiner in people making a decision, and I would also add real estate. Right? I don't know how many people have been to Mexico, but if you start walking down the street there, you'll go to one stand and they'll offer you, they'll see that you're interested in something. Maybe you're interested in those margarita pitchers or whatever, right? But you don't make the decision then. You're like, I'm going to keep going. Well, you'll see those stands repeat. It's the same stuff over and over. And finally, 5 stands later, you're like, all right, let me get that margarita pitcher. It's the same thing in any other marketing. So yeah, Dr. Lowe, I think that's a great point. Having more real estate is a good indicator that you'll get more conversion.
Cool. Well, how do we go about deciding like what keywords are good and then filtering out keywords that are bad? Like, the people talk about long tail of like there's certain stuff that doesn't get searched for that often, but when it does, if you can get those specific search terms, then maybe you can get them cheaper. How do we even decide what terms we're going to use and how to structure that or research that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think there's kind of the professional answer to that, and then there's maybe the hobbyist answer to that. The professional answer to that is that you need to do a lot of keyword research, and there are some great tools for that. So Google has what's called a Google Keyword Planner, and what it does is it literally lets you search for keyword topics, and it suggests other related search terms, which is great because no matter how smart we are, we can't think of every related keyword. It's almost like you need a thesaurus to go and be like, well, what are these other synonyms that I'm supposed to be coming up with here? And Google has a tool built in, and it literally suggests volume. So you can say, well, what are the most popular keywords? So that's really helpful. And if you're doing this professionally, you spend a lot of time in there. And not only that, but you also look at accounts and you look at past behavior. You say, well, what do people actually search for? Here's a really good nugget for anyone that's doing Google Ads right now, or they're working with a company. There's a report, and Google has actually gone back and forth. Are they going to keep this report? Are they not? So last I checked, they still have it. But if you're listening to this in the future, it might be gone. It's called the Search Terms Report, and what this is, it's literally the keywords that people search for, right? It's cool because you can actually go in there and you can actually see what people are searching for, which helps you actually build a keyword list so what is it that you should be bidding on. So I think that's really one powerful way to build your keywords. Now, I said that's maybe more of the doing it day-to-day professional answer because it takes a lot of time. Here's the good news for you if you're like, I want to try doing this on my own. There's actually different types of keywords you can bid on. There's one keyword that we'd call an exact match keyword. It sounds exactly like what it is. It means that if you want to bid on dental implant near me, you type those exact keywords in. They have like quotation marks around it, right? So it's like, this is the exact phrase. And you can show an ad when someone types that exactly in. But there's another type of keyword called a broad match keyword. And this is what's really helpful if you're a hobbyist, where you're like, I don't have time to think of all this stuff. You could say, I want to show an ad if someone were to type in dental implant and anything else. So it could be dental implant near me, best dental implant, cost of dental implant, And so it's predictive. It almost uses AI, right? And you can say, I want to show an ad if you search for dental implant in any type of a sentence that you type in. That uh, that lets you guess and show ads to a lot more people. But there's a downside, right? You can show ads to people that have no interest in buying a dental implant from you at all.
There's also I, so I was looking at my friend's Google ad account who does a lot of this and is one of the kind of hobbyists who's spent a lot of money and spent a lot of time on this as he's done his startup over the last year. It also seems like there's a way to exclude keywords that like people that it suggests and it people click on it because of that keyword and you're like no, I don't want those ones. What's that called?
For those of you, you guys can't see us. I swear I'm not holding up flashcards for Dr. Lowe, like keying him up to ask these questions. That is the perfect lead in. That's like exactly where we want to go. What those are called are negative keywords. And right, so let's use an example. If you were to say, I want to broadly match with anyone searching for the keyword dentist, I think we can all agree that that's pretty reasonable. It sounds like it makes sense. Well, let me try something out for you. What if someone just searched for average dentist salary? You just showed an ad, boom, it just popped up. Now, maybe people won't click on it, so that it's not going to cost you money, but um, we'd say, how to become a dentist. Boom, we just showed an ad. Here's the really tricky one. This is where people get in trouble. It's when anyone that's done Google ads probably has had this experience where they get phone calls from people trying to schedule for a different office, and they get frustrated. They're like, what the heck is happening? It's the third call today. This is a sign that something is wrong with the campaign and it doesn't have good negative keywords. For our team, we will go and we'll do a geographic search, usually about 15 to 20 miles around a practice. We'll find every competitor and put them in a negative keyword list. Mm. Why is that? Let's use the word dental. You might say dental, good keyword I want to show up if someone searches for dental. Well, if you are, I'm going to pick on one of our clients here, Precision Dental, and then there's another practice down the street called Anderson Dental. If someone searches for Anderson Dental, boom, your ad just popped up to the top. Now, I'm always surprised at how people confuse this because the ad copy probably says Precision Dental, serving people for the last 20 years, whatever it is. Someone still clicks on it and says, hey, I'm trying to get to Anderson Dental. That can be a problem. And that's where negative keywords can help you box out other businesses or search terms that you don't want to show up for.
Okay. And so it can be as specific as other practices, or it could be like, I'm looking for implant patients. I'm not looking for denture reline patients or something like that. It's like, I want someone who's doing immediate denture, but not relines, or, so you can kind of niche down within specific procedures and get even more in depth.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think the key thing that you really want to focus on are, if someone were to, I'm going to use a memorable example here for everybody. So you'll have to forgive me if it's a little off color here. Implants, right? You'd say, oh, I want to show up for implants. Well, there's a big difference between tooth implants and some other type of implants, right? And so that's an example of where you may want to be careful with how general you get with your broad match terms and use negative keywords to make sure you box out stuff that's not relevant.
Okay, cool. So, and this is where, it's just like any other topic in dentistry. If you talk about investing with a dentist, there's a certain, or the business of dentistry and running a practice, some dentists are going to be like, ooh, this is exciting. Other dentists are going to be like, I don't even want to think about this. This is stressful. This is like, ugh, awful. But we tend to serve, we want to give enough information that someone can have an intelligent conversation with whoever they're trying to get to set this up with them. So let's say someone wants to delve into this and they've got a budget. They're trying to decide, okay, do I spend $100 a month on this? Do I spend $500? Do I spend $2,000 a month on this? How how do we tell like what a good budget is, and if that money is getting us anything? How do we start to commit and say, I'm going to start spending some money. I'm going to get some feedback from this, without going nuts and just telling Google spend all the money wherever you can.
Yeah. So there's kind of two key things that I think we need to focus on here. the first thing is budget, and the answer, unsurprisingly, is it depends, but we'll try to just be as general as we can. If you come in and you spend a really small budget, you say, I'm just going to try $100 a month. What that's going to do is it's going to limit your ability to optimize the campaign. Now, this is like, optimization is like marketers' favorite word. Like, we optimize this and that. And I think a lot of times as a client, you might say, what the heck does that really mean? Well, in this case, what we're talking about is the more data we get about what keywords people both click on and then ultimately convert from, and we'll talk about conversions in a minute, and what ad copy people click on and ultimately convert from, that lets us make decisions in the campaign to say, we like this keyword or this ad more than other ones because it's more likely. It increases the likelihood of conversion. And so if your budget is smaller, you can't really make decisions off of 5 clicks, 10 clicks. So generally speaking, at Wonderist, the sort of starting budget we see work best is about $1,000 a month in actual ad spend.
Okay.
Here's some other good benchmarks for you. On average, the cost per click on an ad will be anywhere between, it can go all the way down to pennies, but usually between $2 all the way up to maybe $10, again, depending on the market. And you can have it go even higher than that. But, I would say an average cost per click is probably like $3 to $5, somewhere in that range. And then the average cost per call or cost per lead is anywhere in 20 is low. If you can get people to call you for $20, that's pretty low. Sometimes it gets into the teens. That's insane. Or it can go all the way up to 70, $80. And then we're not even talking about specialized campaigns. How many people would be happy to pay $70 to get an all-on-4 phone call? I bet a bunch of hands just went up like, hey, I'll do that, right? So it depends on what those keywords are, what those searches are. But you typically want to see your cost per call be like 30 to $50, somewhere in that range. That is a pretty typical metric.
So that's like kind of estimating, if you got if each click costs $3 to $5, hypothetically, let's say $4, just for some easy math. Let's say that in this given month, your cost per click is $4, and it takes 10 people clicking on the ad to then one of those call. Then you've got a 1 out of 10, and therefore your cost is $40 for that one call because it took 10 people clicking on an ad. Is that the math we're doing here?
Yeah, I really would encourage. I think a lot of times people, when they start working with paid search, the thing they think about is like cost per click, PPC, pay per click. So click is the thing that they focus on, and that's a great segue into sort of the next piece of this. Like, how do you know if it's working? The first metric you should always be focused on is what we would call the cost per acquisition, or really the cost per lead, right? For most marketing systems, it's difficult to totally tie it back to someone's scheduling. You've got to integrate a lot of technology to do that. For most dentists, you're going to really be focused on cost per call. And so cost per click, that can be manipulated. And I don't mean that in a negative way or a malicious way, but it can be easily controlled by an agency. Dr. Lowe, if you said, Mike, my priority is to have the lowest cost per click out there, what we'd do is we'd say, okay, we don't want to always have that ad be in the first position or even the second position, because the more we are willing to spend, Google will say, we're going to give you spot number 1. We'll say, we're happy to be in the 5th position. And we're not going to be as priority focused, but now our cost per click is lower. So if you're going to your marketing agency and you're saying, I really want my cost per click to be low, you're probably not helping your campaign. Or if you yourself are doing this, cost per click is not the focus. In fact, good AdWords campaigns should see that cost per click probably go up over time. My reason for that is that, think about this from an optimization standpoint. You found a keyword and you found an ad that works really well. In fact, whenever someone sees that ad, 20% of the time they end up calling your office. Do you want to have more of that ad? Do you want to put that ad higher or lower? You're like, higher, of course, which means you're willing to pay more for people to click on it. So your cost per click, if you optimize for success, might actually go up. But that also means the number of calls that you get and the cost per lead would go down. So cost per lead is the main metric we look at.
And that depends on having a converting ad that are and a compelling website that compels people to call. So they're actually going to click on it, and then once they click on it, they're going to go to the website and look at you and what you're doing, and stories and videos and testimonials, and pick up and call. Um,
Yeah, there's two key things, and I sometimes I think some of this stuff is implied, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page. It is so important that you do call tracking when it comes to Google Ads. If you're not going to do call tracking, do not do Google Ads, because all you're going to be doing is putting money on a bonfire and hoping that the smoke that comes from it attracts patients, which, you know what, maybe it will, but we want to make this data focused. And so call tracking, for those of you that have not really, heard of it before, you might have run into it on direct mailers, right? You can like put a little phone number, it's different than your phone number. Someone calls it, and you can actually see the number of people that called from that direct mail campaign. Well, on websites, you can put a piece of code on the back of that website, and it literally sees where people come from. And in the case of Google Ads, it can actually see what keyword and what ad they searched from. So that's how we get that data. We can literally look at a spreadsheet and say, this keyword generated 20 phone calls last month. That's a good keyword. This keyword never seems to generate phone calls. Let's stop it. So call tracking is key to the success of optimizing campaigns long term. But Dr. Lowe, you said something that was really important, and it kind of gets into this next question of like, where does the traffic go? Now, listen, if you're doing this on your own and you're like, I just don't have weekend after weekend to give to like, to like figuring this.
I do want to interrupt
sorry,
you. I'm sorry.
question?
I apologize. Going back to the call tracking.
Yes.
That's one of those, like, okay, you said certain keywords generate certain calls. Are you having like different numbers per keyword? Like, how is the call tracking able to help you? Because if you have like 200 keywords, or 100 keywords, or 50 keywords, like there's not enough numbers on a call tracking voice IP thing to do that. So I just want our listeners to know like what's available and how that can be done.
Yeah. So the good news is there's people way smarter than us that have built technology that really makes this easy for all of us. But I don't want the takeaway to be that you need a phone number for every possible scenario that someone could come up with, right? What really happens, and I will get just a little more technical here, is that you end up getting a number for each channel. So for example, if you want to see if someone calls you from Facebook, you would have a number that is specific for Facebook. If you have, if you want to track people coming from Google ads, here's where it's a little different. You would probably have what's called a number pool. So there'd be three numbers, not 100, but three. And you might say, well, why just three? Because if I come on your website and we have just one phone number, that number can remember enough information to say, Michael just came on our website and he searched for this keyword and this, this he came through this ad specifically. But now let's say Dr. Lowe also comes on the website and the phone number is like, who am I tracking here? So you basically need a pool of keywords so that if Dr. Lowe comes on the site, he sees a phone number for Google Ads. And if I come on the website, I see a different phone number for Google Ads. And then it can remember, each of those phone numbers can kind of remember information. So it depends on how much volume your site has. If you're like, we have 10,000 people that come to our practice a month, you might need more phone numbers in your pool. For most dentists out there, you only need 3 phone numbers. And honestly, for most people listening, this is the stuff that an agency will probably just be doing for you, hopefully. But if you're a hobbyist and you're doing this on your own, most call tracking services, they have this stuff pre-built in. You just basically put the code on your website, you say you want a Google Ads number, and they automatically usually make it a five pool, or 5 number pool is what they would do by default.
So to do this, you're not having to like change your phone provider just to be able to like do call track.
Call tracking sits in the middle, right? So if someone calls you, they call this number that's different than your actual number first. Instantly, it gets redirected. It's like postal forwarding, right? It's like a
URL redirect where it just
exactly. So the experience for the person that's going through it, they never know. They'll never know. And you don't have to change any of the IT stuff in your office.
Cool. Okay, cool. That was like a question that I've had, floating around, that I thought like you have to switch to voice over IP and like get it all set up in your office and have different phones. And maybe that was the old school version of doing, call tracking. Okay, cool. So then we're talking about landing pages.
Yes.
Maybe I spoiled the punchline.
That's okay. You're one step ahead of me here. So, there's this question of, okay, where do we want traffic to go? And, the best case scenario is to send traffic to what I'll call an aligned landing page. Now, what does aligned landing page mean? That means that if someone is searching for Invisalign, it's going to be more confusing and it's going to be less likely that they convert if you just drop them on your homepage because they're like, okay, I'm ready. I want to learn about Invisalign. And then boom, we drop them on the homepage and there you're talking about a new patient special offer and you know you're there's all this general information and then they've got to go in the menu and then they go to services. Oh, there's Invisalign. It's more steps to get where they want it to go. So the best case scenario is that we take them to a specific page that speaks to the problem or the solution they're looking for. And one extra note, the more of a funnel you create here, the better, right? You want to make it very clear to people what action you want them to take. So I would suggest deciding, is it call us today? Is it schedule online? Is it fill out this form so we can give you a special offer? Those are kind of the most common ones. So again, there's so many different ones we could get into, but you want to know clearly what that is, and don't mix your messages. Just pick one and stick with it. Purists for landing pages will tell you don't even let them have the option to go anywhere else. Don't even let them have a menu to go back to your homepage. Stick them on a landing page and give them one option, which is to either continue reading to decide if they're going to take that step or leave. Those are the only two options they have.
So and that feels very like internet-y. Like it doesn't feel like typical dental practices. That feels like, okay, I'm landing on a course that I'm thinking about buying, and that course has a great funnel and they've got a great landing page, and there's like nowhere else to go on the website. I just keep scrolling until I buy your product. So I think that's less familiar to dentistry. But in general, these landing pages are not pages that someone would click on from the menu on your website. These are custom built for that search term or for the paid advertising that you're doing. And if you do choose to let them go back to your website, they're probably not going to be able to like click right back to that page. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, I want to be very clear. I said purists would tell you that. I
Right.
think we fall a little bit more in the middle. And you might say, well, why is that? At the end of the day, most dentists are not dealing with, hundreds of millions of dollars of marketing budget. And they're not dealing with hundreds of, millions of views where, every little tweak that you make can be the difference between a 2% increase in sales or not, right? And so what we recommend is when you're building your website, you have service pages and you hopefully for those of you that listen for the SEO talk, why do we need service pages? Because it's going to put you in a better position to rank for those specific pages. And those should be your landing pages. I hate that there's this idea out here that like service pages are just meant to be boring, informational, throwaway pages. No, those are your landing pages. They should be conversion focused. They should have a call to action. They should have a next step. And so, well, I want to tip my hat to all the marketers that are going to shake their fist at me and say, don't give them any options. At Wonderist, what we do is we really lean into building websites that have landing pages baked into them. I would encourage you to do the same thing. And it's probably okay if there's a menu at the top that lets them navigate around. It might not be a best practice, but it's certainly more efficient for you. And I think that for the budget and the time investment most of our dentists have, that's probably the best way to approach building landing pages.
Okay. Okay, cool. So you build your whole website and your service pages as if they were well converting landing pages, because why waste the real estate on a boring page that wouldn't have converted anyways? Um, I think maybe in certain circumstances, if you've got a really high dollar procedure or you're getting really aggressive on a specific, if you're really like, okay, this is our clear aligner month, we want to book 40 clear aligner cases. We're going to do, 3 different landing pages. We're going to split test these. We're going to get some data so that next time we do one of these, we have a lot better knowledge of which page converts better and all that. Then maybe people could get aggressive about that. Do people ever do that with you guys, or how would you recommend that?
Yeah, so I think that's great advice. If we're just generally looking at building out a AdWords campaign, especially if it's something that you're doing on your own, I think that, unless you're just fully committing weekend after weekend to building out unique landing pages, it's a lot to take on to have your website, then build out individual landing pages. But if you have campaigns that you, one or two that you really want to focus on, they're going to be a big part of your practice moving forward. Having those fit the more traditional isolated landing page model, I think makes a lot of sense. I think I would 100% encourage people to do
Okay,
that.
cool. So trying to think, what else have we not covered with paid Google search and this cycle of learning, because this optimization, this like, okay, I'm going to try this, I'm going to learn from this, and which was going to make me better at doing this the next time around. Um, that's the cycle that whether you're hobbyist or working with someone professionally, you want to take advantage of that data rather than set this up once and never look at it again. So setting the expectation of like this is going to take several months or longer to dial in, and how often would you recommend people revisit this, and how long should they set as an expectation to dial this in the first place? So there's the initial learning phase, and then there's the how often do we come back and mess with this later?
Yeah, it again, it depends on your ad spend, right? So if you're spending $200 a month, it's going to take a long time to really get that information to make decisions. If you're spending $1,000 or more a month, I think that it's okay to look at it monthly and make a few decisions, but probably really looking at sort of 3 month check-ins and saying, okay, what have I learned? And it is still, we're dealing with a very small data set at that point, so it's that's probably on the earliest side that you can really have some strong insight and say, you know what, I think we're starting to see a trend here.
Okay. Okay, cool. Well, go ahead.
So there is one more significant piece of the puzzle that I want to bring up here, as long as we're talking about sort of this, and we should think about these as funnels. The system that you want to build for yourself is one where you, first of all, focus on message, right? That's something, and I know we've talked about this before. If you don't have a message that's going to resonate, again, you guys know I encourage you to be authentic in your photos and your videos, be a real person. And also, while sometimes offers don't always feel like the first thing we want to do, if you're going to have an offer, have it be something that people are going to care about, right? So message is the first part. Channel is the second part, which we've been talking about, but there is a third part to that, and it is having a system to follow up. And so one of the biggest things that we see our offices struggle with is missing leads or not knowing how to follow up with leads. And so having a, I will say, automated follow-up system that is able to nurture leads into making a decision is crucial. And we all need to examine our own habits for a minute. How many times do we make purchase decisions that are spur of the moment? Sometimes we do if it's like $100 pair of shoes, easy. But buying a car, you research online, you go to multiple sites, you see an ad, it brings you back, you go into the dealership gets your phone number, they text you, they call you, they text you, they call you, you finally come and you buy. Like, that's been my experience every time. And dental offices, especially if you want those all on four cases, or you want to do those big veneer cases, or anything that's going to be a bigger purchase decision, most people don't roll out of bed, grab the credit card between their teeth and shuffle on into the dental office. They think about it. And so you need a system. I'll give you one right now. If you miss a phone call, you need to have a system that automatically texts that person and says, sorry, missed your call. How can we help you? So now at least they're like, okay, there's someone there. They start a conversation. Maybe they text you back and you don't get back to it for 45 minutes, but they know that you're there, right? That's key. If you don't have that, you are absolutely throwing marketing dollars out the door. And that's the simplest follow-up system we can come up with today. There's stuff that
Cool.
gets way
No,
more
and
advanced.
that's having some way of, because I've even heard of companies that will bring you these leads, and it's like, here's the leads, but if your office doesn't call them and follow up with them, then it's what's the point? And so in a lot of ways, we're generating our own leads. We're working so hard to get people to click and enter our ecosystem, um, and I think another part of this too is that action of call or schedule online, like, that's the ideal, like, we want them to do those things. There's some other subset, and we've talked about this before, I think 2 episodes ago, where maybe these people aren't ready to make that decision yet, but they want more information, and we can capture their email addresses, we can a phone number, a text, all of that. There's lots of ways to maintain that relationship, and stuff like that, like you just said, um, is very useful in maintaining that relationship. Um, let's shift the conversation now from paid Google to paid social, because a lot of times when people are thinking about that, they've got a certain amount of advertising dollars to spend, they think, okay, I've got $1,000. Do I put that on Google? Do I put that in Facebook? Do I put that on Instagram? How do you frame that conversation and that decision making of, we have money to invest, but we don't know which platform to invest this in?
Yeah, that's great. And I think there's a real easy distinction between the platforms. So the way you want to look at this is Google is really good at connecting you to people that are actively making a decision. That's why it's more expensive, right? If someone searches for cost of dental implants, they're looking to make a purchase, right? That's someone that's like, I need a dental implant and I'm looking to buy. And so it's really great because you can speak to those people and you can get their attention and jump up and down and bring them into your practice. Social media, however, very few people go on Facebook or Instagram and say, "Gosh, I hope I find a dentist today." Now, there are probably people that do, but most people don't. And so I look at social media as a discovery platform, right? And it's gotten so much more powerful. I really want to start with this idea of, you go 20 years ago, like, how did we advertise? Newspapers, magazines, that's what we'd be talking about, right? Maybe the yellow pages. And at that point, you'd pick a magazine or newspaper that you felt spoke to your neighborhood, spoke to your demographic. But you'd buy an ad in there, and half the people that would read the newspaper, probably you knew they were never going to be a customer, but you had to put it in there, right? You couldn't just put it in the newspapers that were going to your potential customer's house. With social media, that's how it works. Again, what are people doing? They've got their phones in their face when they're, sitting in your lobby. They're on social media. Well, now you can target people based on their demographics. Are they a man between the ages of 35 and 45 that live in this geographic area and are interested in sports? Cool. Show all those people this ad. That is incredibly powerful. And so, what you want to do there is you really want to focus on building an audience, targeting the right people. Audience building is huge. And then you want to build awareness and nurture towards action, right? What does that mean? That means the first thing that you come out of the gate with probably isn't, uh, you know, come on into the office. It's build your brand up a little bit, right? Let people know who you are, introduce yourself. And over time, social media advertising is so affordable, you can get that repetition, that frequency. We talked about that before with ads. Like, hey, if it shows up more than once, it's better, right? Social media is perfect for that. You can show ads multiple times and build people towards starting to say, you know what? I've seen that dentist before. They're everywhere. I think I'm going to actually learn more today.
Okay, cool. I think what you hit on there, there's two things. There's two sides of it. There's like, this is general and broad, and people aren't searching for this. But there's also a lot of data that you can work with. So it's kind of this weird combination of, you can get really specific, but that specific subset of people still is not necessarily looking for you at that moment. And so I think maybe sometimes people think, compared to paid Google search, it's like, well, I can't get specific about who is searching for me. I can only get specific about the terms they are using to search for me. Whereas this gives you way more information about the who, but not at the moment that they're making a buying decision.
I think that's perfectly put. There is one exception to that, and I think that this is probably the biggest no-brainer for anyone that's looking to do a little bit of social media advertising. Remarketing is one of our favorite tactics on social media. Now, what does remarketing mean? It's this idea that if someone shows interest in you, they come to your website, that you can follow them around. Now, we've all had this happen, right? Like, I am shopping online. I like to look at shoes online, and next thing you know, that shoe that I almost bought, it's just following me everywhere. It's next to the YouTube video. It's next to the news that I read. It's everywhere. You can do the same thing. That's the cool part about this, right? You don't have to be this big marketing agency or take all these courses. You can use Facebook's ad network, and Facebook owns Instagram. So that means Facebook, Instagram, all the apps that they have purchased ad space in. There's a lot of different places. And by putting a tracking pixel on the back of your website, that means if someone lands on your site and they leave, you can continue to show them ads. What are the ads that I like to see here? Testimonials, that's the big one, right? If you can have your patients saying, hey, gosh, I just came into Dr. Lowe's practice and I love the team, I love the atmosphere, and and here's how he helped me. That's social proof. That's the kind of thing that plays really well on social media. So if you want to do one thing on social media, set up a few remarketing ads for yourself and just let them go. And I think you will absolutely see new patient generation come from that. And it's going to maximize the people coming to your website.
Okay, so these are people who have visited your website at least once, um, and they were logged into Facebook on that same browser, because otherwise how how does that work? Like, like thinking about it now, it's like they have to have visited your website and then Facebook can target them. But how does Facebook know that it was them? They had to have been probably logged in on that device. Is that how that
Yeah,
works?
well, and this is the world that will make your brain explode. There's what they tell us and what actually happens. I think we've all had the experience of, we start all talking about cat food at a dinner party, and all of a sudden you start getting ads for cat food, but your phone was off, and you're like, I don't have a cat, So the officially, and Facebook will say that there is, cross device mapping. So like your phone and your laptop are linked in a way, right? So you could technically visit a website on your computer, and Facebook is on both, and so it can basically bring it over to your phone. So it's mapping all the things that you do. Most of us have opted into the fact that they're tracking this. They're changing this. They got in trouble for all the stuff that they're tracking on us, and so it's adjusting. But I think we should all continue to expect and accept that if we're online, it's all being tracked, and probably more so than what we want. You could say, oh, well, if we're logged out of Facebook, they're not tracking us. There's a lot of data to suggest that's not the case. They will tell you it is not the case, but I don't feel confident about that. The reality is that if you put a pixel on your website and someone visits that website, they get tagged by that pixel. And that pixel will be able to identify them when they log into Facebook or they log into a network that is controlled by those social networks. And you will be able to show an ad to them.
Okay, cool. So a great low-hanging place to start on social media advertising is retargeting. Can you also retarget on Google ads and YouTube ads and other things like that? Is that available elsewhere?
Yeah. So in the world of Google advertising, remarketing also exists. It's really more focused on what we would call display advertising. So, we focused more on the keyword ad side. That's where someone searches for a keyword, and you put up your display, or sorry, your search ad, right? The other version of this is that Google also lets you have a pixel, and we've all seen the banner ads, right? The banners that are next to YouTube videos, the banners that are next to news websites. A lot of those are through Google's ad network. And so you can do remarketing through that as well. Again, your cost per click is really low. These are very, very cheap ads. The reason for that, again, is that you're just showing it to anybody. They may not be at a point of decision. Remarketing increases the likelihood that that person is at a point of decision because they already came to your website. So here's a great funnel for you. If you're running Google ads and you get someone to click on an ad and come to your website, but the ad was for all on fours, it's a big decision. They're not ready. They did some research, they got distracted, they moved away. Well, wouldn't it be great if you had a pixel on that website that just so happened to follow them right into Facebook, and now they're on Facebook an hour later, and boom, a testimonial pops up of someone from your office talking about how their life was changed through denture alternative permanent full arch implant. Well, now they're like, oh, I remember I was looking at that. They come back. So you can see how these two things can connect to each other and create a really great patient acquisition system.
That's awesome. Um, so talking about budgets for social, for Facebook, Um, we talked about how it takes a little bit more to get some decent data on Google and to be able to refine and optimize over time. Is there a range of like, under $50 a month, and you're never gonna, not never, but you're not gonna get a lot of data? Or is there a lot of optimizing? Do you optimize in the same way on Facebook that you do on Google? Um, because it's keyword based or it's more person based. So I'm trying to think of like how to set up a budget, how to experiment with this, and then iterate on that on social and how that's different.
Google, I think, takes a lot more discipline and a lot more. You have to be more experienced to do optimization on Google because there's a lot more levers to pull behind the control panel, right? What keywords are we bidding on? What's the ad copy? And then there's this whole world of bid modifications. When do we want to show ads? Do I want to show an ad when it's raining? I mean, you can go down this rabbit hole of like, crazy stuff that we haven't even gotten a chance to talk about today. Facebook is built more for the everyday amateur marketer. And they did that intentionally. They want it to be easy. And so really, while there are certainly many different levers to pull, what audience you're targeting, um, where you're showing the ad. I think for the average dentist, the thing you should focus on the most is the message. What is it that I'm saying? What's the video? What's the photo? And that's where you can do testing. But a good budget, and I think this is where Facebook has just opened up a huge opportunity for the small business owner. $100 goes a long way. You can really do some great marketing for $100 a month budget. And so I think where Google, it may seem scary to say, oh gosh, $1,000, I don't know. I would put it back to you and say, if you really get one patient from that, the lifetime value of that patient should easily offset your investment. That's my marketer brain kicking in. But $100 a month in Facebook should really let you get a lot of visibility for that. And so I think that's a good starting point. But we certainly see campaigns that will be $300 a month up to $1,000 a month if they want more coverage.
Okay. Okay, cool. That's great to hear, and that's great to like set people's expectations, and also the sophistication level of these two tools of, you know, sometimes someone in startup mode or who's just having a real tight month, and it's like, okay, we can play with this little bit of Google or a Facebook advertising here, see what it does for us, versus someone who's aiming at a specific topic and wants conversion on that procedure type. The Google might be better served for them in that use case.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary, 100%.
Okay. Um, One last thing I thought about that I forgot to bring up on Google, and came up with the Facebook a little bit, was radiuses and how large of a diameter we're pulling from. Um, are they both equally good at choosing that radius and being able to target down or go really broad? Is there one that's better at like geolocating patients and where they're coming from?
You know, both Google and Facebook have definitely continued to improve their ability to target based on location. And so, it's not even just as simple as a radius. You can target by zip code, and so you can actually get little clusters of areas. Or you can, target a zip code up here and then a separate zip code that's, in a different part of town. So you're not limited to just a, pin on a board and then, drawing a circle around the pin. Although that is frequently the most common way that people do targeting. I think that for the purposes of our dentists today, the targeting is absolutely, as sophisticated as it needs to be. As far as the average radius, again, it depends. Like a super urban area, like my wife and I used to live in LA. If you take a 10-mile radius in LA, yeah, I mean, you go 2 miles in LA and they're not going, you're not driving 2 miles to a dentist. It's not going to happen. But if you go to, Kenosha, Wisconsin, 10 miles might be a reasonable radius. I think a good way to look at this is if you're in a hyper urban area, you should be 5 miles or under. If you're in a suburban area, I think you can go out to 10 miles. And if you're in an area where you are the only practice for, or you're the only practice that does a specific procedure for 20 miles or more, go as far out as you can until you start to compete with those more clustered urban areas. And that's probably on the generous side. Sometimes you can even dial it down more. Here's the thing: start a little bigger, and if you feel like you're not getting traction, go down from there. Don't choke all the life out of the campaign right off the bat and then decide as a last gasp to go bigger. Start bigger and then restrict
And
it.
it probably, like, specialists in general, if we're talking about an orthodontist or an endodontist or whatever, are going to have bigger radiuses. They're pulling from a bigger pool.
True, but the other thing to note there is, who are we trying to market to? Like a lot of times, sure, it's patients, but we might also be trying to market to other professionals, in which case we're targeting a whole different audience now, and that's probably a whole nother conversation.
Well, to wrap this up, is there anything else, someone who's is stepping up to this stage of paid search and really trying to do this the right way, whether that's a little DIY or whether they're working with someone, um, is there anything else you'd add to kind of the mindset, the mentality, the strategy of this?
The number one thing that your marketing will live and die on is the message, and it gets overlooked so quickly. We're all tinkers. We all want to start asking the questions about, well, what about this bid modification, or how should I build negative keywords? And I think the encouraging thing for all of you is that good content wins every day. So you could be someone that feels really overwhelmed by hearing all of the nuanced details of targeting and negative keywords and all that. If you come up with good content, or you have a good message that resonates, you can write it on the back of a napkin and it's going to work, right? That's the thing that I would leave you with. So most people don't spend their time there. And before you do any serious marketing and spend money on it, make sure you have something that you feel will really help you stand out. And it's not enough to just say we're the friendliest dentist in town, or we've got a 199 new patient special offer. If you look around and everybody else has the same thing, scratch that idea off the board and start over. And if you can get that right, you're going to have a very good time with all the marketing channels that you end up attacking.
This is all super exciting for me because, like, you and I are going to be having these conversations, and your team, as I am ramping up all of this in the next 2-3 months. So if someone is interested in reaching out to you guys and working with you guys and managing their paid search with some help and with backup, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you and to have that conversation?
Yeah, I'd encourage you to go visit our website. It's www.wondroussagency.com. You can actually schedule right on there. You can find a time that works for you, and that just goes right on our calendar. If you have a question for me personally, you can reach me at michael.anderson@wondrousagency.com.
Awesome. Michael, another phenomenal episode. I really appreciate you being willing to, like, answer my dumb questions, because that's what these episodes end up being is it's like I think in my head it's one way, but really it's not that way. So I appreciate your patience. I appreciate this your willingness to come back episode after episode to go into these topics and provide value and enough context for dentists to make these decisions around their marketing. So thank you.
Happy to be here.
Cool. Awesome. We will talk with you all next time on the Shared Practices podcast.